I think Amorim understands that to get the kind of playing squad that they need, to get the kind of results that they want, it's 18 months of hard times. And maybe next year they'll be in a better position. They'll challenge for Champions League.
Let's get some reaction to these quite candid comments from Manchester United co-owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe today in an interview with the BBC. Covered a range of topics. We're going to start by discussing his comments on recent transfers. Here's what he had to say. If you look at the players we're buying this summer that we didn't buy, we're buying Antony, we're buying Casemiro, we're buying Onana, we're buying Højlund, we're buying Sancho. These are all things from the past. Whether we like it or not, we've inherited those things and have to sort that out. He went on to continue that quote, saying, it takes time for us to move away from the past into a new place in the future. Some are not good enough, and some probably are overpaid. For us to mould the squad that we are fully responsible for and accountable for will take time. Now, Chris, I think it bears worth saying that we appreciate these kind of candid comments from owners so often, and this was one of the huge criticisms about the Glazer family. We never saw them in an interview, whether that be quotes like this or sat down in front of a TV camera, almost ever. So we do appreciate when owners come and speak to us in the media and the fans as well, and get to hear what they're feeling and how they are reacting to some of the discussion about them in the press. I'm surprised at these comments, just specifically about transfers, because he mentioned players by name. And so often when it's managers or owners, they'll talk vaguely around a subject and perhaps admit obliquely that they feel a certain way, but they don't name players. Here he did so. Were you surprised by that as well?
Well, and there are players that are in the current squad. Yeah, Jadon Sancho's on loan at Chelsea. Yeah, Antony's on loan at Real Betis. But Rasmus Højlund's still leading the line for Manchester United.
Onana's still in goal.
Right, he's still running his socks off up front. Maybe not scoring goals, but he's still putting in an effort into the team. And also, if I'm an opposition club, or if I'm someone in the transfer market and I'm going in to buy Antony, and they're like, oh, we would like 50 million. I go, well, the owner came out and said, not really worth the paper, not really worth the money that we paid for him. So you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position. But to your point, it definitely is honest. To me, the one thing, though, is that it does absolve a little bit of Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe's role to play in the current situation. We'll get to the comments about laying people off and about getting rid of meals and all the things that have made the headlines, but they've not been perfect either. They brought in Erik Ten Hag. They brought in players this summer who have been a mixed bag of results. You're starting to see some decent performances from the likes of Yoro and De Ligt, and Joshua Zirkzee as well, I think, is having a good moment. But Ruben Amorim has been slow to get going. This is an overall all-encompassing disaster. But there definitely is a huge amount of this that is they inherited a mess and they're trying to clean it up. And I actually kind of admire Ruben Amorim's position and at times the club's position, that they know that they have a massive amount of work to do that is not easy, that takes suffering through some bad results, and they feel like at the end of this process they'll be coming out the other side of it. I think Manchester United have had to suffer for a long time, and they kind of been putting it on a credit card for a while, and now they're finally starting to pay some of it off, and it's going to hurt. It's going to be difficult for a period of time.
And he also kind of touched on and shone a light on something that you and I know, and people who cover the game week in, week out know, but a lot of football fans don't appreciate, is that these transfers aren't just money down on a table. You get the player right now and that money's gone. You have to pay for these players over a period of time. It's a contract that lasts more than just the moment you shake the hand and the players sign. And I think he was shining a light on the fact there that they're still paying for some players who they signed quite some time ago.
Well, I mean, you look at Jadon Sancho just as an example. First off, it's a crazy amount of money that you're paying, 90 million or whatever it was. You pay that over time, but they have him on loan at Chelsea right now, and they're paying half his salary. They're paying half his salary for him to play for another club. That's the only way to get off of that, because it was that big of a disaster. And it just goes to show, and look, we're talking about 40,000 here and employee there. This comes down to the fact that the big expenditures that they have made down the years almost entirely have not worked. And you can talk about Jadon Sancho as one of them. You can talk about Antony as one of them. You can go back to when they spent a bunch of money on Paul Pogba to play in midfield. They've gone again and again for these big-time £60 million+ transfers that don't work at all, and you're trying to get off of, and sometimes you get off at zero regaining of any of the money. It's a sunk cost the entire way. And so you're just lighting money on fire. And that's a very difficult thing to handle as a club when it goes up against your balance sheet, that you are not even regaining anything. You can't even make sales. You can't recoup any of the costs. It's so difficult for a club to climb out of that hole, but they're in that hole now. And so they have to, step by step, difficult bit by difficult bit, work their way out of the trouble.
You mentioned the manager, Ruben Amorim, the current manager of the club. He did speak about him. So here's Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments about Amorim. I think Ruben is an outstanding young manager. I really do. He's an excellent manager, and I think he will be there for a long time. He is, as most great coaches are, an emotional character. Ruben is not perfect, but I am a great supporter of Ruben. That, to me, sounds like this is someone who's there for the project, that regardless of what happens this season, he's going to get the summer and quite a while next season, unless something goes absolutely cataclysmically wrong, to rebuild this team.
I think probably the things that would not please an owner would be the comments that he's made, this is the worst Manchester United team ever, and the sort of negativity that he's brought to we are nowhere near being where we want to be. We are on, and that shines a light on how big the pain is going to be for the club. But I agree with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. I think that Ruben Amorim is exactly the kind of manager who, and he even said it yesterday, there were periods where we grinded it out. This isn't who we want to be. They don't want to be the team that even put in a good performance against Arsenal yesterday, but basically created nothing for 45 minutes, suffered for a long time, and then eventually got a result in the second half with some good performance. But I think Amorim understands that to get the kind of playing squad that they need, to get the kind of results that they want, it's 18 months of hard times. And maybe next year they'll be in a better position. They'll challenge for Champions League. Maybe they'll be in the Champions League as a result of winning the Europa League in this final stretch of the season. But it's a longer horizon. You have to think of it as a longer horizon because you've tried these short-term managers to get results or to get good feelings back in the case of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They needed to tear this thing down to the studs and say, who do we want to be as a football club? And how do we build that piece by piece, not winning next year, not winning a title next year, but actually implementing a process that works over time? You think about how Pep Guardiola started at Manchester City. They finished in 4th in the Premier League the year that Leicester went and won it, and it was this kind of embarrassment that he came in and was so far off the pace. But you build it, you get the players you want in, and then Ruben Amorim can maybe flourish as the coach of Manchester United. But I understand that you have to think of it over the longer view because you watch some of the performances now, you watch some of the difficulties that they've had. It hasn't been good. It hasn't been good, and any other manager would be under that kind of pressure if you weren't thinking about the long term.
Ratcliffe, interestingly, in the interview, he didn't just come up with excuses and reasons why things were the way they were. He also admitted that the club had made some mistakes. This was him on Dan Ashworth, the former footballing director, who was obviously involved in the signing of players and new managers as well, and then also talking about the former manager, Erik Ten Hag. I agree that Erik Ten Hag and Dan Ashworth decisions were wrong. I think there were some mitigating circumstances, but ultimately, they were errors. I accept that, and I apologise for that. Firstly, as I just said, we must tip our hats to the fact that he is admitting that they make mistakes, and often, owners of big businesses, not just in football, never admit that they make mistakes. But to point to those two specific, interesting areas of the game and the club where they did genuinely make a mistake, and agreeing with, I think, the feeling of a lot of fans.
And this is the tightrope that they're walking right now, is they are trying to correct mistakes, but they can't really make any more because that would only serve to further compound the problem, especially with them. He's saying, and we'll get to the financial situation, he said they're going to run out of cash by the end of calendar 2025 when you spent money on firing Erik Ten Hag, when a lot of people could have told you even after winning the FA Cup, this isn't your long-term guy. And maybe because they didn't have anyone lined up in the summer, he says in the interview that it took them a while to get things settled, to figure out who they wanted to be as a club, and they were making choices about managers and player signings without a ton of time through the door. But they have made some mistakes. And if you look at the overall pattern of Ineos as a sporting enterprise, Nice are 4th in Liga, and they had a really terrible year in the Champions League. Even you go down to the cycling team that they own. It's fallen off from where it was when it was under the Sky ownership. You go to their involvement in the Mercedes Formula One team. Since they've gotten involved, they've fallen off. So Ineos as a sporting enterprise are not exactly an organization with a brilliant track record. And so they have to come into this club that already, you're on a very fine margin and have to get everything right, and they haven't done. And they have made mistakes that have cost the club much more money than they're saving by getting rid of 40,000 pound a year employees. They're making mistakes that cost millions and millions and millions that are adding further into the overall financial debacle that Manchester United are right now.
He had some specific comments about the financial situation at the club, which I think was very revealing for fans. Let's have a quick look at what he had to say about that. Manchester United would have run out of cash, alluding to what you said there, by the end of this year, by the end of 2025, after having me put $300 million in. And if we buy no new players in the summer, we're in the process of change, and it's an uncomfortable period and disruptive, and I do feel sympathy with the fans. And here I think I like the way, again, that he's accepting and feeling sympathy for the fans, but also suggesting that, look, you guys were not happy with the Glazers, and they treated this club like they were some kind of giant vampire squid, sucking every single penny out of it that they could, loading it up with debt. And did they genuinely feel that strongly about Manchester United being successful as a football club rather than just a business? You can feel angry about that, but also you have to accept that because of some of those decisions, we have to make also difficult decisions to get this club back on track financially, and that may not necessarily be easy to take.
Yes, and they also have to figure out a situation with the stadium as well, which is going to take a significant expenditure. Ultimately, what I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe is trying to articulate there is just how bad the situation had gotten. That under the Glazers' ownership, that they had run their course, that they had taken out their dividends, they put the company on the public stock exchange, and they have taken everything they possibly could, and they left a complete mess for someone to pick up. And we were talking about this before the show, where I think in an ideal world, Manchester United fans would like for the debt to be cleared, for the team to be built up again, a first-team squad that can win Premier Leagues and win Champions League and represent the Manchester United badge, that tickets would be cheap, and that everything was fine. But the only real way to do that is at a significant loss to somebody. If you want to run this like a proper business, you have to make very difficult decisions about cuts. The one thing, though, where this comes off as tone deaf is you're talking about getting rid of programs that involve ex-players and employees that don't make a lot of money.
Food at the training ground,
Food at the training ground. When the biggest thing is the money that they spend on players not getting results. And it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions that don't get results.